Hello, YouTube. So there's a few things I want to talk about in this video. As some of you know, and those of you that are new here probably don't, when I'm here in Ecuador, I split my time between my farm that is about an hour outside of Quito, and the rest of the time I'm at my apartment here in Quito, Ecuador. And this week I'm going to be here at the apartment because I'm doing a bunch of medical appointments and laboratory tests. The reason I'm doing them here instead of in the United States, where I have pretty good insurance, is because I find it a lot easier to have access and I have a lot more control over the direction I take my healthcare here in Ecuador. In the United States, it takes forever to get an appointment with a doctor, especially if you don't already have a family doctor. Where I'm at in West Texas, where I'm working, it can be like 6 months to get an appointment. And when you do get an appointment, you don't have a lot of control. You kind of get, you are the product of the healthcare system and you get shuffled along the way they want you to go. And it doesn't feel like you have a lot of power to say no, or I don't want to do that, I want to do this. Here, it's really the opposite, which can be good or bad. You can just go to the laboratory and call for whatever tests you want. If you already know, you don't need to go to a doctor first. You can go to the pharmacy and get pretty much anything within reason that you want without going to the doctor first. So if you know that you've got some sort of bacterial infection and you just want to go get an antibiotic, you can do so. You don't have to go to the doctor, pay them, get a prescription, go to the pharmacy, get that prescription, take that prescription, and then go back to the doctor for a follow-up. You can take control of your own health care. Great if you're fairly educated and responsible, and terrible if you're not. And so this week I've been having problems with my hand, so I'm doing a lot of tests to see what is going on with the arthritis in my hands. I'm doing some follow-up because last year I had a hernia surgery, actually a triple hernia surgery, and I just want to do a checkup, a follow-up, to make sure that all is well with that and that I don't have any complications before I get all tangled up in the U.S. healthcare system over it again. So that is medical stuff is one thing I wanted to talk about, and how even though I have good insurance in the U.S., I choose to pay out of pocket in Ecuador because it simply works better for me. The other thing I want to talk about is crime and safety and just whether it's worth living here. Now, there's been a lot of bad press about Ecuador, and some of it deserved. This went from being one of the safest countries in the world to one of the most dangerous. I think right now it is the most dangerous in South America. But that is an oversimplification. The media plays it up, and they technically tell the truth while missing the point. That tends to happen a lot with the mainstream media. So what is happening is that there is kind of a cartel war going on. It is a war between the cartels amongst themselves, and it is a war between the government and the cartels. And that means there are really high levels of violence, but it doesn't affect everyone and it doesn't affect everywhere. Personally, my experience, the parts of Ecuador I frequent and the way I live my life, I am safer in Ecuador than I am in the United States. I have had more problems with theft, more problems with violence, more problems with crime in general in the US than I have in Ecuador. But if I lived on the coast, that may not be true. If I was a local Ecuadorian that was in a bad neighborhood, that almost certainly would not be true. If I was a local business owner, that would almost certainly not be true. So it's very dependent on who you are, where you are, and what kind of lifestyle you live. But for me, and I think for most expats in the mountain towns, expats and tourists, if you're in the mountains, if you're not in the border areas, if you're not on the coast where most of the narco trafficking is happening and the wars over control of the narco trafficking routes, then I think that it is very safe. And later in this video, I'll take a walk around this neighborhood. I'll show you what this neighborhood looks like in Quito. Now, Quito is not as safe as Cuenca. Cuenca is probably the most popular expat destination. It's the best known. It is where expats move when they want to feel generally safe and they want to live around other expats. For a lot of people, it's easier, more comfortable if they have a bunch of other expats living in their same community. For me, I'm kind of the opposite. I would rather live in communities that aren't full of other expats because, quite frankly, we drive the prices up. And when you have too many expats living in one area, eventually you attract people that prey on the expats. You attract crime, scammers. Most commonly, and you already see this in Cuenca, there's a lot of real estate scams going on, a lot of things that are way overpriced, really just targeting expats that don't know better. But Cuenca's, over time, becoming less safe because it is an expat magnet. And anywhere you've got all these people that maybe are vulnerable because they don't know the culture very well and have a lot of disposable income compared to the locals, it's going to attract people that prey on that. My area, it's along the Ruta Escondida. There's maybe one or two other expats living in that area. I don't know if there's any Americans besides me out there, but I think there's a couple Europeans in the area. It's not an expat area. It gets tourism. It gets a lot of tourism, but it's local tourism. It's known as the Garden Frutal, which is fruit garden of Ecuador, and it is a place where people from Quito go for the weekend to go shopping for fruit and try the local products made of fruit and see this beautiful rural area, visit haciendas and fincas, and it's basically just local tourism out there. And it has remained extremely safe. Most of the mountain towns have remained extremely safe. Quito is an exception. Quito is the capital city. My neighborhood in Quito is great. There are some other neighborhoods around and in Quito that are great, but there are also some extraordinarily dangerous neighborhoods. So it's like any huge city. It's going to have something, some places that are on the wrong side of the tracks. It's going to have the poor neighborhood where people are desperate. And where people are desperate, there is crime. And in Ecuador, because there is a problem with the cartels, one of the common crimes in poor neighborhoods is extortion of small businesses. So there are neighborhoods where you would not want to own a business because you're going to be paying all your profits to the cartels. So is Ecuador safe in 2026? It depends. Depends on who you are, depends on where you are, and depends on what you're doing. If I were in a safe neighborhood as an expat, but I got mixed up with buying drugs, I would not be safe. I would quickly get targeted. If I were living in a safe neighborhood, but I like to go out at night and party and found myself out at 2 a.m. walking alone, I would not be safe because of my behaviors. But if I'm an expat here, living a simple life, going back and forth between this apartment here in a great neighborhood and my little farm, which is also in a great neighborhood, and generally minding my own business, I am, in my opinion, safer than I am in the US. So let's take this camera outside and we're gonna walk around the neighborhood a little bit and see what we can see. Standing out on my porch, it's kind of windy out, so I'm not sure how much of the wind the microphone's picking up here. Behind me is the beautiful neighborhood park. I've shown you guys that before in some videos, but first I wanted to show you our little greenhouse here. So it's just a plastic mesh around it. This isn't really to raise the temperature so much as to protect the plants from the wind. I haven't looked in this in a while. These are a really cool plant. This looks like it is parsley, maybe. Some basil, some very sad looking strawberries. We start plants here to prepare them before we move them out to my farm. I just wanted to take a little peek in there and see how things are coming. We got a bunch of avocado pits up there. We can use these door just slammed. We can use these avocado pits to get avocado trees started, and then I take a cutting off one of the avocado trees that I know will produce lots of fruit, and I graft it on. Let's head downstairs. So even though it is a good neighborhood, every place has a very secure entrance here. That is the norm. But this is one of the few neighborhoods in Quito where people will leave their cars out on the street even at night. That is not normal in Quito. So let me show you this little park. See, there's a guy sleeping on a bench, but that's not a homeless person. That's just somebody enjoying the beautiful day. On the weekends, this park is full of families, full of kids. People walk their dogs here. People actually pick up their dog poop here, which is also not the norm in Quito. Let me just show you around this little place. There's a lot of really cool plants here. And I've taken many cuttings from this park to get plants started for my farm. It's a great little spot. I wanted to show you something I was noticing the other day, something I've seen in the US, but this is the only place I've seen it here in Ecuador. It's a little mini library. Check this out. You can just come and take a book and leave a book. How cool is that? One of the reasons why this little neighborhood is very safe is it has a guard. Everyone in the neighborhood pays what's called an alícuota, which is sort of like a condo fee, and that pays for a guard and these little dogs that are the protectors of the park and everyone's cars when we're leaving them out at night. But it's a beautiful spot. It is a beautiful spot. This particular dog does not really like me. I'm gone from this area often enough that he starts to think I'm a stranger, he doesn't remember me, and he wants to scare me away. So from this neighborhood, which is, it's a little island of safety, is how I've described it in past videos. And that is still true. I can walk out of here to some areas that are absolutely not safe. And that's how it goes in Ecuador. So if I walk out of my little neighborhood and I take a left, I'm still in a pretty nice neighborhood, but it slowly gets worse. If I walk out of here to the right, which I just did, and up to the main road, it will get significantly worse fast. I get into a very industrial area. It's a spot full of mechanics and auto part supply stores and a very popular bus stop. And it's generally unsafe. It's still the north of Quito. It's still far safer than anything in the Centro Histórico or the south. South Quito is pretty bad. Or La Mariscal. The Mariscal is kind of the party neighborhood, but it gets extraordinarily dangerous at night. Flip the camera around again. So the third thing I wanted to talk about in this video is elevation. And this kind of ties back into the first topic, which was healthcare. There is a zone all around the world that promotes longevity. There's been studies that have done and that shows that at high elevation, within this elevation zone, people simply live longer. That between, I think it's about 1,800 meters, 1,800 meters, and around across the street here, 1,800 meters and 2,500 meters, 2,500 meters, people live longer. Quito is above that. Quito is at about 2,800 meters. Some parts of it are a bit higher, at 2,850. And Cuenca, I think, is a little bit above that. Sorry, this is a really noisy area. I hope you guys can hear me. My farm is at 2,390 meters. It's at the upper end of the range, but it is within that Goldilocks zone where people live longer. The zone, the Goldilocks zone, also tends to be the area in Ecuador, because you're right on the equator, that people call the valleys of eternal spring. These are the parts of Ecuador that have a near perfect climate. So part of why my little farm is my paradise. Hola, ¿cómo estás? People are friendly here. Somebody saw me with the camera and just wanted to say hi. Part of why my farm is my little paradise is the climate, and part of it is how it affects my health. Here in Quito, Ecuador, I've got a headache. I just came from Texas. I'm adjusting to the altitude. I took my blood oxygen level. I took it twice, and one time it said 94, and the next time it said 92. I have a little bit of a sleep apnea issue sometimes, and you combine that with the high altitude, and my oxygen levels start to get a little too low. Thus the headache and being out of breath. On my little farm, I don't experience that. Just a couple hundred meters elevation difference makes all the difference in the world to me. So, let's see, I'm going to turn this camera around. This is one of the areas where I got to be very careful with my camera. Super busy, popular area. Bus stop right here. This is a spot where if I am not on my toes, my camera will get snatched. Kids just getting off the bus. They built these little bridges over the traffic because there's almost no other way across some of these streets. There is not a really good culture in Ecuador about driving and following the rules, and they will just run pedestrians down. It can be really hard to get across the street. This little hospital is where I'm doing most of my medical exams right now. I started out with a bunch of laboratory tests that I do every year or every time I visit, and it's very convenient. It's a little bit pricier than it needs to be, but I pay for convenience. I have to fast before I do a bunch of these tests because they're checking for blood sugar levels and cholesterol levels and things like that. So I just have the gal show up at my apartment here. She showed up at 7:30 in the morning, took my blood, takes it off to the lab, and emails me the results, so I don't even have to go into their office. And I don't have to spend more time fasting and waiting before I can have my morning coffee. But all the other tests, like in Ecuador, you'll find that pretty much everything you need is walking distance away. So all the other tests and visits with the doctor that I'm doing, not all of them, most of them, are at that little hospital that's like 3 blocks from my apartment here. And you'll find that to be true of almost every neighborhood here. You'll find just about everything you need within walking distance. Hospitals, pharmacies, grocery stores, mechanics, bicycle shops, restaurants, some little place that fixes shoes, some little place that mends clothes, everything you need. So, I'm not sure how much of this video is going to be usable over the traffic noise. I guess we'll find out when we upload this to my computer. But I think that covers, run across the street again, I think that covers pretty much all I wanted to talk to you guys about in this video. Healthcare, safety, and the altitude. With that, I'm going to turn the camera off and get back to my adventures and medical appointments. Ciao.